All right, after this, I'm probably going to take a couple days off because my brain needs a rest after the last couple of days. Now we know for sure that there was storage in the bow of the boat. All right, so now at this point, I am pretty sure that the Triton was there all day. They didn't switch out the boats. And I'm also pretty certain at this point that this is a real video because there's one single frame where you can see Bart's boat and you can also see the toes of somebody like dangling them off the water. So if the picture or video were AI, it would be a really bizarre thing for it to just kind of throw in. But there's zero question in my mind that this video has been altered. So then the question becomes, why would they alter this video? And the only thing that logically makes sense to me is to alter the identity of the two girls. Because if Carter is the boy in red, Wyatt is the boy in the American shorts, Bart's brother Brooke being the one in the navy blue shorts, and then Ike being the one in the teal shorts. Then we've got Warren up here with somebody in this red striped swimsuit and the girl in the teal swimsuit with the backwards hat. So in this picture, this would be Brooks, this would be Ike, this would be Wyatt, this would be Warren, which would leave this to be Carter. Now, whoever this is seems to be very cuddly with Carter. Like, too cuddly, in my opinion, for it to be like a mother or a family member. Thinking about it a lot from the timeline that we have been told, and what we haven't really been factoring in again is the party. Because remember, Warren said he went to the party, but instead of talking with all of his friends, he went upstairs to go talk with his girlfriend's dad. Now, those families are tight, so if that dad of Ava, if that conversation with the dad didn't happen, then they would automatically know that they were lying. So I've been saying for a while that the girl was somehow involved. And mind you, everybody's back on land now. They're getting ready to do the fireworks and everybody's swimming and drinking still, blah, blah, blah. So what's the excuse for no pictures at that party? They've explained it all away during the day, but at this point, they're all just being teenagers and having fun again, right? So I'm thinking that the brunette girl is Ava, the girl whose house they went to. And she's pretty close with Warren and the Pyrone family.
And they're full speed running. And then after that, I didn't see them anymore. I think you were on the boat. You start from there?
Yeah, so after we planed off, Wyatt kept the boat pinned the whole way in. We ran into the mouth of Fort Bayou, where we came from originally. And we turned into Fort Bayou, went in the channel, ran probably 500, 600 yards into Fort Bayou. Wyatt had jumped out of the boat, put the plug back in the boat so access water. So water didn't keep pushing and filling back the boat.
According to their own words, they went into the mouth and then they turned and they went about 500-600 feet. Now, mind you, the party house is right around, but they go past it and then loop back around. However, Warren just admitted that at some point they had to stop and Wyatt jumped in. And even then, you heard him stuttering over the story. Like, it wasn't a smooth transition because I think they dropped her off. Which would explain why they would go back to this party, because obviously they can't cancel the party. That looks really suspicious. Then my theory has always been that the guys all like broke off and like talked to the parents about what was going on, and that's when they formulated their whole we'll call her and then we'll call the Coast Guard plan. Remember, she is related somehow, I can't figure out, but she is related through marriage to the lieutenant that wrote up the very initial report we've seen. Because remember how Morgan claimed that the picture of the boat stuff was circulating around Snapchat and stuff, even though Christine didn't post it to her Facebook page until the next day. Listen to this.
His mom was, what was he wearing? And so we were trying to remember what color his shorts were. We couldn't quite figure that out.
I said black.
Yeah, I think we said black.
I really did. He was wearing navy blue shorts.
Yeah, it was like dark blue shorts.
Dark. I just said black because I was trying to piece everything together and help out.
And so at this point, we're freaking out. We don't know where our friend's at. And the girl that took the picture, she was like, okay, well, I just took this picture of today. This is what color swim trunks he was wearing. And his mom asked for that to post on Facebook to say, if you've seen him, whatever, this is what he was wearing.
So remember, the girl who took the picture with the digital camera was on Wyatt's boat at the beginning of the day and then was there with them at night when they were having this discussion. So she had to have been there at the beginning and at the party at the very least. Then we remembered that the original shorts picture, well, that wasn't the color of his shorts, as we now know. So we also know for a fact that this picture did not get sent to Christine until July 5th, meaning that they had to have had that picture and then not sent it to her for hours. Because they also said this.
And so that's what we sent to her, or that's what she sent to her, because we were just trying.
So they corrected themselves. He said, we sent it, No, she sent it. Then on July 5th, Christine said that they have been up for almost 48 hours straight, and then the very next post above it are the same pictures but better quality. Why did it take so long to get these pictures to them? Oh, and y'all, now that I said that, I realize, so all of these pictures had to come from the same digital camera, right? Meaning this picture did as well. And since I've already proven that this picture had used AI to do something weird because, you know, there was no little bar here, only explanation for using AI on just this little part would be to obscure the reflection that was in this poll of the person who was taking the video. Or the pictures. Oh my God, yes. That makes sense. Love it when I figure that stuff out in real time for you on camera. So it makes sense to me that this photo video thing was altered to cover up this girl's swimsuit. Because let's face it, this swimsuit is the ugliest thing. It has like supposedly like sleeves and it's a tankini, but it goes like in a weird cut, but it's ugly. It's ugly and it's clearly not what these debutante beauty queen girls are wearing to a 4th of July beach party. So I'm like 70% sure that this is Ava. Oh wait, oh my God. Wait a second. Shown y'all guys before that there's 4 boats out here, this little cluster, right? But I'm looking at these weird pink lumps and stuff at the front of the boat, Bart's boat here. Is that a pile of life vests? Because I'm realizing there's not 20, 30 people on all of these boats. Like I'm seeing 10, 12 people here tops. Let's not forget what a full house looks like on these boats. Because even in this video at the meetup place, there's not 20, 30 people getting ready to get on these boats. I mean, the boat left at 9:56 according to the GPS. We got like 7, 8 people here, like 6 people here. And also, if they were legitimately needing to be towed and they were trying to get the water to run off, why are they all spread out on the boat? Why are they on the boat in general? Why didn't they just get off on land or get on another boat? Trying to get the boat to tip up and go planing, why do you have over half the boat on the front of the boat? These are experienced fucking fishermen. They know better than that. Yeah, I can't believe I've never thought of that before. If the boat was sinking, why are they even on the fucking boat? Yeah, and if it was so common and so easy to get, you know, rides back with other people, you know, strangers on Horn Island, why did they need to load everybody on the boat? Why were they yelling at Nolan to get on the boat? They didn't need to get him on the boat. And now that I'm looking at this, doesn't it look like Warren is on the phone? Could this have been when he was calling his mom 8 times? Also, one more thing that stuck out to me.
We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time. After we left Jackson's house that night, I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this.
He stumbled over his words from beginning to end in that story, so I don't believe any of it. But the one thing that sticks out to me was the phrasing, they don't know anything about this. If people are heading over to your house, why wouldn't you call your mom and dad before you called 911? Because it sounded like he was trying to keep his parents out of the loop of this story, which as a teenage boy implies that you have something to hide. Just a lot of different things to think about, right?
On the island. When was that ever brought up? Why are they doing these podcasts? Like, what? Are you sure that the mom is a judge? Or are you sure they have lawyers retained? Why are they doing these podcasts? Because if I'm your legal counsel, at no point would I be telling you that it is a good idea to talk about anything. Because there are literally cases being built right now. Anything they say, it can go into... Why are they doing these podcasts? Someone is clearly encouraging them to do this. And for whatever reason, it's not good. But this lets me know a couple of things. For one, these boys are definitely fighting this case in the court of public opinion already. The more public they can make it, the more times they can go out there and tell any story, the more times they can frame it as if they are just these 4 innocent little boys that went out with their one friend and they just don't know what went on. And the fact that people are trying to make this an issue is just, it's so terrible. It's so evil. They're fighting this case in the court of public opinion right now. It's so they can get ahead of any jury. I've said this before. This is what they're doing. They're trying to get ahead of juries. They're trying to get ahead of the selection that will take place. They're trying to get ahead of all of the stories that will be told when a trial comes and they have to pick a jury and people have their opinions. They're trying to get this out there already. This also tells me they weren't Nolan's real friend. They weren't. They absolutely were not friends with that young man. And I don't care how many different times they say they were, their behavior screams otherwise. They know what happened to him. They know. And that's why all their stories keep changing. Or they're volunteering details that nobody asked for. Because like I said, who brought up dumping Nolan's body on the island? Who said that?
The new audio came out from that Cito dispatch. I want y'all ass in jail. From Bart to Wyatt to that damn mom who was that judge. Yeah, I knew something happened to Nolan Wells. Look, in that Cito dispatch call, before somebody picked up, can we cover it up? You killed him. Is he already dead? Nolan, wake up. Look, damn it, Bart. I think Bart ass did it. That's what I think. Look, wake the up. They panicking. They need to be in jail by tonight.
You're about to get everything that's coming to you. But what's getting me is the fact that why is the internet solving this case before the sheriff's office? That's what gets me. Y'all were so quick to declare that there was no foul play. Just an accident. And look what we're turning up here.
There's things that seem weird there, and it's still, to me, you were in the location where his body was found, very close to where his body was found, and that's when you called for help and your grandfather called to cancel help, and there were 7 people on the boat, and there's some commotion in the background, and it doesn't sit right with me. Like I said, boating culture, I don't know how you leave with 7 people in a boat full of water. And I also don't know how you leave with 7 people and not a boat full of water and end up not going very far because they were still right off the west tip and having a boat full of water. I need somebody to explain to me how that happened in calm seas with a boat that was operational when you loaded it.
Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Yes, baby, we all know he was drinking. If you actually looked at like half of the photos from that day, he was holding a High Noon or some other type of seltzer in almost every other photo. We already knew he was drinking. Why are you now talking about it? What is the benefit of being, oh, he was heavily drinking that day? The better question is, who is providing alcohol to people who are 18, 19, maybe 20 years old? And from there, what role does that play in his murder? The question is, what happened to him and why did he not make it home when everybody else did? Not was he drinking or not. Who cares? A, we already knew that. And B, what's that got to do with anything? Y'all will not distract us from the truth and the reality of the moment. The question is, what happened to him? Not why did it happen? Not, well, what negative light could he have possibly been painted into to justify the harm that befell him? Shut up, girl. What happened to that baby? Why did that happen to that baby? Why is that the news y'all trying to push and not the things we heard on the audio? Not the fact that his mother is suing everybody and their mama trying to get as much paperwork as she can, as much documentation as she can to figure out what the heck happened to her baby. That's what we should be talking about. Not he was heavily drinking. Oh, local teenager heavily drinks on boat and more news at 8.
Everyone connected to this case has spoken. Nolan's mother has appeared in interview after interview. His father has publicly described specific details about the night his son disappeared. Warren Hudson has sat down for multiple interviews. Javon Williams has spoken on national television. Even Bart Edmiston, a young man who wasn't originally part of the friend group, has gone on the record to defend himself. Everyone has spoken except one person. Katie McCormack was the last person confirmed to talk with Nolan Wells before he disappeared. Her name has been public for weeks. Her sister has spoken on her behalf. Nolan's own mother has described having a private conversation with her. And yet, throughout 6 weeks of intense national coverage, Katie herself has never given an interview, never issued a public statement about what happened that afternoon, and never publicly explained the conversation she had with Nolan on that beach. We're not here to tell you why. We don't know why, and neither does anyone outside Katie's own family. What we can look at is what that silence has actually meant for this case. Because the one account that could possibly address the central contradiction surrounding Nolan's final confirmed moments is the one account the public has never heard directly. Tonight, we're laying out exactly what has been said about Katie by everyone except Katie, and exactly where that leaves the investigation. If you're new here, subscribe now, because tonight isn't about a brand new piece of evidence. It's about the shape of a silence that has stayed at the center of this case since its earliest days. Let's start with who has actually spoken, because the contrast matters. Christine Wansley has given detailed interviews to major outlets about the night her son disappeared. She has discussed the phone calls, her frustration with law enforcement jurisdiction, and the moment she learned that Nolan's friends had his phone. Elmore Wansley has also spoken publicly, describing his own account of retrieving Nolan's keys and explaining the inconsistencies he says he ran into that night. Warren Hudson has appeared on camera multiple times. In an early interview, he described the boat, the mechanical failure, and his account of a verbal exchange with Nolan before the group left the island. He later appeared in a joint interview with two other friends, talking about what the past several weeks have meant for them personally. Javon Williams has also spoken directly to major networks, offering his account of the last time he saw Nolan and strongly disputing the idea that Nolan would have simply chosen to stay behind. Even Bart Edmiston, whose role in the story reportedly involved helping tow a distressed boat, has had his attorney speak publicly and repeatedly. His attorney addressed a false claim that had spread about Bart and described the threats his family received as a result. Every one of these people made a decision at some point during the past 6 weeks to speak publicly about what they know, what they remember, or what they believe. Some of their accounts, as we've discussed before, directly contradict one another. But there is one thing they all have in common. Their accounts exist on the public record. Katie McCormack's account exists in a completely different way. And it's important to be precise about that difference, because online discussions have often treated secondhand statements as though they came directly from Katie herself. They didn't. According to reporting from the Daily Mail, Katie McCormack, who was 19 years old, was the young woman identified in the friend group's account of that afternoon. But that information did not come directly from Katie. It came from her sister, Gracie McCormack, who gave an on-the-record account of what Katie had told her. Gracie said Katie had a conversation with Nolan and believed he was getting ready to get back on the boat he had arrived on. According to Gracie's account, Katie assumed that because Nolan's friends were telling him to get on the boat, they wouldn't leave without him. But notice something important. Those were Gracie's words, not Katie's. This was a sister relaying what she says her sister told her. Separately, Christine Wansley has described a private, face-to-face conversation she had with Katie. According to Christine's own account, Katie told her that when she and Nolan said goodbye, Nolan told her he planned to head back and rejoin his friends. That is probably the closest thing the public has ever received to Katie's own account of what happened. But even that information came through Christine's retelling of a private conversation. It was not Katie speaking publicly herself. So when you strip everything down, the public record contains two secondhand versions. One is a sister relaying what Katie allegedly told her. The other is Nolan's mother describing what Katie allegedly told her during a private conversation. And that is essentially the entire publicly available picture of what Katie experienced during that afternoon. There is, however, one moment in which Katie's own words reportedly appeared publicly. And interestingly, they were not about the actual conversation with Nolan. According to reporting on the case, after a social media post was made defending Katie against online speculation, Katie responded directly. Her message was brief. She expressed gratitude toward the person defending her and said she could only pray for healing for the family, describing the entire situation as terrible. That's it. That is the extent of Katie McCormack's own public voice in this case after 6 weeks of national attention. A brief response. No explanation of her conversation with Nolan. No description of what Nolan said to her. No account of what she said to him. Nothing that directly confirms or clarifies the contradiction that has shaped public understanding of the case since the beginning. And that contradiction is worth stating plainly. because it is the reason Katie's silence matters from a purely factual standpoint. According to the friend group's account, Nolan chose to stay behind, specifically because he wanted to keep talking with Katie. Their version is that Nolan told his friends to leave without him. But according to Gracie's account of what Katie told her, Katie believed the exact opposite. She believed Nolan planned to get back on the boat with the group. That creates two very different versions of the same final interaction. Attorney Ben Crump has addressed that contradiction directly. In essence, his argument is simple. One side says Nolan was going to get on the boat, while the other says he chose not to. Those two versions cannot both be completely accurate as they currently stand. Someone's understanding of what happened has to be wrong. But there is an important distinction here. That doesn't automatically mean someone is deliberately lying. It means there are conflicting accounts. And figuring out which version the evidence supports could potentially move the investigation forward. The person who was actually present for that conversation and could explain what happened from her own point of view is Katie. And she has never publicly described it. But we need to be extremely careful about what that means. Katie McCormack has not been publicly identified as a person of interest by investigators. Nolan's own family has publicly expressed support for her rather than publicly accusing her. According to her sister, Katie has cooperated with investigators throughout the process. And cooperating privately with investigators is completely different from speaking publicly. A person can answer investigators' questions while choosing not to take part in interviews, social media discussions, or public statements. That decision by itself is not evidence of wrongdoing. There are many legitimate reasons someone in Katie's position might choose to stay silent. She may have received legal advice against speaking publicly. She may have been warned that anything she says could become part of a permanent public record. Once a person gives a public interview, every sentence can be clipped, reposted, picked apart, or taken out of context. And this case has already shown just how intense that scrutiny can become. Other people connected to Nolan's disappearance have faced serious consequences after speaking publicly. Warren Hudson has described receiving threats. Bart Edmiston's family reportedly faced a serious threat connected to a false claim involving a misidentified photograph, an incident that ultimately involved the FBI. Even Nolan's own mother has described being targeted by an anonymous professional complaint that was ultimately dismissed as baseless. So if Katie has watched what happened to other people who entered the public conversation, choosing to stay silent is not hard to understand. It could simply be a rational attempt to protect herself. That is the fair reading of it. But there is another side to this that cannot simply be ignored. The specific contradiction at the center of the case concerns a conversation that only two people were actually present for. Nolan was one of them. Katie was the other. Nolan is gone. Katie has never publicly described that conversation. And that creates a very unusual gap in the public record. Almost every other major detail surrounding this case exists because someone was willing to put their name behind it. The GPS timeline. The reported tow call. The friend group statements. The accounts of what happened before and after Nolan disappeared. People have publicly attached themselves to those versions of events. But the conversation that may sit directly at the center of Nolan's final confirmed moments exists mainly through secondhand retellings. That doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that Katie is hiding something. It doesn't prove that the friend group's version is false. It doesn't prove that Katie's sister misunderstood her. And it certainly doesn't prove what happened to Nolan after he and Katie went their separate ways. What it does reveal is a genuine gap in the public record. And that gap happens to exist in exactly the place where one of the case's most important contradictions lives. 6 weeks into the case, nearly everyone else connected to the story has stepped forward in some form. But this particular gap remains. So what would actually change if Katie eventually decided to speak publicly? It would not necessarily solve the entire case. A direct account from Katie would not automatically tell investigators what happened to Nolan afterward. It wouldn't explain every detail of the timeline. It wouldn't establish exactly how Nolan died or what happened after he and Katie parted ways. But it could potentially answer one very specific question. What exactly did Nolan say during that final confirmed conversation? If Katie gave a direct, on-the-record account, Investigators and the public would no longer have to rely solely on a sister's secondhand account or a mother's memory of a private conversation. They would have Katie's own description of what she remembers. That would matter, whether it solved the larger mystery or not. Because closing one specific gap could remove an entire category of uncertainty from a case already filled with conflicting information. Think about how many different theories trace back to that unresolved conversation. The friend group's version that Nolan chose to stay behind. Katie's reported understanding, relayed through Gracie, that Nolan planned to return to the boat. The arguments over which version should be believed. The theories built around both possibilities. The public debate over what Nolan intended to do. All of those questions circle back to a small number of words spoken between two people on a beach during what has become the final confirmed conversation of Nolan Wells' life. And the only person who can directly describe her side of that conversation has never publicly done so. But we're not going to speculate about what Katie would say if she ever decided to speak. We're not going to guess at why she has stayed silent. And we're not going to treat that silence as suspicious simply because it represents one of the few major gaps left in the public version of this story. Instead, we're going to call the gap what it is. A gap. Nothing more. Everyone else has spoken. Nolan's mother, his father, his friends, the young man who became the subject of false accusations because of a photograph. Even the attorneys involved in different parts of this story have given interviews. This case has generated an extraordinary amount of public commentary, from national figures and local officials to people online who claim they have solved the mystery themselves. But one voice has stayed largely absent from that conversation. Katie McCormack's. And that is where the case stands tonight. The autopsy remains sealed. Toxicology remains outstanding. The grand jury has not yet convened. And the contradiction surrounding Nolan's final confirmed hour remains unresolved. Did Nolan intend to stay behind? Or did he intend to return to the boat? Right now, the public record still relies heavily on secondhand accounts of a conversation that only two people actually had. If Katie McCormack ever chooses to describe that conversation publicly in her own words, that specific thread could finally move toward resolution. Until then, this isn't necessarily a mystery about who is lying. It is a gap in the public record. A gap that happens to exist in the exact place where one of the case's most important contradictions lives. And only one person can directly fill that gap. So far, she hasn't. We'll keep following this case as new developments emerge, and if that missing voice ever enters the public conversation, we'll be here to break down exactly what was said, what it changes, and what it doesn't. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because if the one voice this case has been missing finally speaks, you'll hear it here, carefully, clearly, and without adding speculation to the facts.
We've seen this before, right? Pattern recognition. We've seen this where things have happened, especially when we talk about the Black community. And, after the death, it's a smear campaign. It's, what can we find out about this person? What can we say? If you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who are saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island. He was heavily drunk. And again, even with the drinking, there are so many conflicting stories. Only because I have spoken with adults who knew Nolan very well, coaches that were out there. One in particular, I think he told me he saw Nolan somewhere between like 2:45 and 3:30. He was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him too that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. Like and it started at the very beginning. It was, oh, he was sloppy drunk. And I'm like, but was he though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use to kind of have us just accept that it was a drown?